Our guest today wears many hats. She's a top-notch chauffeur, an enviable snack maker, and I think she'll tell us, just kind of as a hobby on the side, she's the president of CS Day Transport. A third-generation family business, CS Day transports gas and diesel. I'm not sure if it's across Western Canada, Canada, or Saskatchewan, but she can tell us. The company started back in 1930, and on the side, they still toss a few groceries around as well. She's active with the Saskatchewan Trucking Association and Canadian Trucking Alliance. She's leading the way in changes in this industry. Heather Day joins us today as a nominee with the YWCA of Regina Women of Distinction, as a female leader committed to creating a thriving and positive culture within her business and the industry. She's an entrepreneur, a wife, and a mom. Heather, thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you, Barb. Yeah, that was a lovely introduction.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've definitely got a full plate.
Yes, yeah, but I like it that way, so it keeps me sane. So I grew up in Regina, and I guess my first foray into trucking was just as a kid. My sister and I would go out to the shop with my dad on weekends, and he would be doing payroll, and my sister and I, our job was just to kind of bounce around, and Mom was a nurse at the hospital, so had to sleep on weekends. So that was kind of how we were first introduced to just being around trucks and all of those wonderful sights and smells that go with diesel engines. And from there, as I got to be a bit older, then sometimes I would help out in the office during summer holidays to provide some cover for the bookkeeper. But it was always just kind of part-time and ducking in here and there just to lend a hand. And the business was still small enough at that point that I knew that, when I finished high school or university, there wasn't going to be a full-time job available. But at some time, Dad was probably going to retire. And, I was already kind of thinking about the possibility that that might be something that I wanted to do down the road. So in the meantime, took a completely different path, and I knew I had till I was about, I thought, 35 years old, and ended up being less than that. Had my own separate career as a high school music teacher, and ended up teaching over in London, England for that time, and got a lot of really fabulous experience that a lot of people think, well, how does that relate to trucking? But we can get into some more of that later, but a lot actually carries over. So then when Dad was ready to retire, then I bought the business from him, and with a business partner as well. And it was 2012, and just kind of dove in, kind of face first. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Hopefully there was no face plant along the way.
Well, a few bumps, but yeah. So it was certainly quite an adventure at the start. You're just getting in, and I already had a little bit of background, but just learning so much more of the details and the day-to-day operations. And I had a little bit of awareness of some of the challenges. One of them that's facing the whole industry is a driver shortage, which is going to become, so that's going to become fairly critical probably in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're already seeing the impacts of it. But that was one of the main ones. So just starting to get to work on that, and how do we make sure that we're an attractive place to work, and even broader than that, how do we make the industry attractive to people who maybe wouldn't have considered it before, just to make sure that there is that strong pool of drivers.
So let's start there then, Heather. How do you make the industry attractive to both men and women?
So that's a great question, because it is very male populated right now. And I think one of the things historically is that the trucking industry hasn't really talked about themselves very much. they're very, I always think of it as being a very backstage industry,
Mhm.
where they're behind the scenes. Most people don't think about how their groceries got to the shelves, or how the gas got to the gas station, or all those fancy crafts supplies over at Michael's.
Well, isn't there like this magic pipeline underground, and it's like the grocery fairies that bring them in? That's what my kids think.
It is,
They
it
also
is.
think there's fairies that clean up around here.
Oh, yes, yes. We have the cleaning up fairy at our house too. So, yeah, but and people don't really think about it. And I kind of had that light bulb moment when I was a kid, and just because it was a family business. So there was actually, it's pretty clear memory. I was probably about 8 years old, and there was this huge blizzard outside. Like, it was dark and blowing and drifting up against the patio doors. And we had hauled all of our, like, a whole bunch of blankets down to the family room and kind of made a nest, and we were watching movies and eating popcorn, and all kind of snuggled in cozy and warm. And then the phone rang, and so we hit pause on the VHS, and Dad went in the kitchen and was on the phone with his driver, and I could hear them talking about, it was some smaller towns in Manitoba that they were talking about, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but knew that the driver was having some kind of delivery trouble, and
Okay.
the gas station was actually too full to hold all the product. So they had to figure out where else they could send it. And so back in those days, it wasn't computerized. And if another gas station in a nearby town didn't answer their phone, then you're kind of guessing. And so they were figuring out a plan for where this driver would go so he could unload the rest of the fuel. And came back into the room after the call, and I looked outside at the blizzard, and it was horrible, and looked at Dad and just kind of asked, like, why is that driver out there? And Dad just said, well, the town needs their fuel. And he was so straightforward and neutral and matter of fact about it that it just kind of clicked in an epiphany that towns need their fuel. And if nobody takes it to them, and if that driver isn't out taking it to them, it doesn't get there. So it just really drove home to me the importance of the trucking industry. And for us, especially the fuel aspect of it, because without the fuel, everything just grinds to a halt.
Yes, it really does. And that's such an interesting story. I had just never thought of it that way, myself before, because you're right. I know that a transport brings in the gas, but when you're in a smaller town here in Western Canada, you are 100% reliant on the trucking industry to get your groceries in, to get your fuel in, to get your school supplies in, absolutely everything, right? There is no magic fairy except at home to clean up after kids. Yeah, I never thought about that. So, okay, let's fast forward. So, number of years ago, back in 2012, so you bought the business from your dad. And I'm guessing, just based on the conversation, that you had a bit of a vision for where you wanted to take this company. Tell us a little bit about that if you can.
Well, one of the factors, when anytime that someone is selling a business, you're always wondering who is the buyer going to be. And often once a business is sold, you no longer have control on how they manage employees, how they deal with all of those safety issues, and strategies. And I'd gotten to know the drivers when I was working there part-time, and thought they were pretty fabulous, and just wanted to make sure that they were looked after. So that was part of it. And but also a little bit beyond that, they are they're kind of like superheroes that nobody knows about. Like, the day-to-day stuff that they just help out with and pitch in, and they're so professional. Just kind of wanted to, if I could, shift things a little bit so the public can see a little bit more about what truck drivers really are like. Because certainly the stereotypes and images that we have are not often very positive, but that really isn't the reality. So
and I know you're correct. Everyone has this industry of the trucking industry. It's a dirty industry. It's men and they're overweight and they're out of shape. You have to be in fairly decent shape to sit in a vehicle that long and to do the work that's required to be done when you're in that industry. So as you think about where the industry is going, how do you see yourself attracting more women into the industry? How do you see yourself starting to change people's perception of the industry?
yeah. So, well, just to change the perception, we just need to get over ourselves and get out there and talk to people about it. It's part of it. There have been this year some social media campaigns as well, put together by the Saskatchewan Trucking Association. It's called We Are Trucking. And then the Canadian Trucking Alliance, at the start of COVID, they had a Thank a Trucker campaign on social media. Pretty, it was nice. But then to attract women, because there are women in the industry, not very many, but it is, by and large, it's a very welcoming industry for women to get into. So part of it is, again, just talking to women and saying, okay, so we know that these are all the things that you think about us, that we're stinky and it's a bunch of gruff old guys. And, but once you actually start to talk to them, and if you can introduce them even, then they start to realize that actually, okay, the perceptions that the general public often has are not true. And, oh, there are actually bathrooms out there. And yeah, so, one of the things, like even for like nursing moms, bunk trucks often have a little fridge and a microwave. So if they want to pump, then you can go ahead and do that and things are good. Just letting people know that, there are a number of jobs out there for truck drivers who still get home at the end of every day. So it's it's not necessarily being away for weeks on end. Although if you want to do that, you still can. But yeah, and there are even jobs where it is like 9 to 5, and you do your shift, and it's not sitting down at a desk. It's out, and you get to talk with people and customers, and you're on the move. So
that's interesting. So there's the short haul trucking, and then there's the long haul trucking. And so, is your business primarily short haul?
Well, we consider ourselves regional haul. So so we deliver throughout Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and we do have a couple of what we consider local, just city drivers. So they're just in Regina from the refinery to the local gas stations. But all of our drivers get home, out and back within the same shift. So so
they do
sleep in, so they get to sleep in their own beds. And we have some single dads. We're able to work around daycare schedules, and like if someone has hockey practice or piano lessons or ballet recital, we fit all that in. And because I'm a mom too, so I know what that is like. Yeah,
exactly. And I think nowadays it's become more important to both genders to be able to tuck the kids in at night, or be there when they wake up in the morning, whatever it might be. Every family kind of has their preference, but as a society, I think it's become more important to us to be available and present in those moments. I know I left a job simply because I was tucking my kids in twice a week instead of 7 days a week. And I was like, okay, this is not why I got into parenting. Though definitely there's times where I'm like, maybe that wasn't so bad. Right? Now that we've tucked our kids in, every single night for 6 months without not being able to see them every moment of the day. So kind of 6-1. So let's talk a little bit about the nomination with the YWCA. I would think that this is a fantastic thing, both for you personally and professionally, but especially for the industry, to start to bring profile to women leaders in the industry, which, even a woman leader in this industry is not typical at this point in time. Right? So let's talk a little bit about that. What does that mean to you, and what do you think it means to the business?
For me personally, it was very humbling. And I think when we spoke earlier, it was actually two separate women who approached me, and they don't know each other. And when the first lady mentioned that, she wanted to nominate me, and of course I had to give my permission, I thought, okay, well, that's very nice and flattering, but maybe I don't know if I'm quite in that league. And then the second lady approached me as well, and it was about a week later, and I thought, okay, they might have a point. So yeah, I talked about how the trucking industry is sometimes backstage, and just behind the scenes carrying on, and that is sometimes my comfort zone as well. So just to stay in the background and just get everything done, and but certainly realized for the industry and for women who are entrepreneurs or considering becoming entrepreneurs that it is important to be visible as well. So
yes. One of the things that I've talked about on LinkedIn is, in a lot of cases, you see these announcements. Corporations announce who their new CEO is going to be. And more often than not, let's just say, like, I want to say it was GM or something. They had their first female CEO, and everybody was all, oh, kudos, that's wonderful. And I thought, I can't wait till we get to a place in this world where it doesn't matter what your gender is, that the announcement is the same. And so the fact that they had to say this is our first woman CEO, who cares? It shouldn't matter what the person's gender is, right? Here's our new CEO, period. End of story. And so there's still these traditionally female, traditionally male jobs. And I often wonder, will my kids still see those traditional roles? Or how many generations will it take before what we see as traditional today will fade, will just blend into the background? I'd love to think it's my kids' generation, your kids' generation, but realistically, what do you think? Is it?
I'm optimistic, and yeah, I absolutely agree that it shouldn't be about, oh, here's the first woman, or this is now our fifth woman that we've appointed. Look at our great track record. Where it should just be the norm, and actually that is one thing about trucking, is that I came in as one of the few women, and people just kind of like, okay, no big deal. And it was actually a bigger deal for me, worrying about because I had some preconceived ideas as well, that maybe it was going to be an old boys club. And so actually my first year, I think, on the board of the STA, I think I barely said a peep in the board meetings, because I was just kind of worried about, is this a boys club? How do I navigate this? I can't talk about hockey or any kind of sports. I live in a different world from that.
Yes.
It really, as I got more settled, realized it was me that was holding myself back. And they were completely fine with me being a girl. So when my first baby came along, well, actually, she was 2.5 months old when I joined the board for the Saskatchewan Trucking Association.
Okay.
And, yes. And so navigating that with, when you're, because I nursed, so you kind of have some time bombs attached to you, and you have to navigate, how do we get through the schedules of the board meetings and all of these things, and not need to go change my blouse. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so true. I remember well.
Yeah. So, so some of that, I realized more and more once I settled in, it was things that I was maybe worried about, and that, at least in the trucking industry, I didn't need to be. Yeah, so it's been really wonderful and supportive, and we don't generally have those, this is our first woman kind of announcements. It's just,
right.
Here's another one of us. Yeah.
So I guess knowing that it's mainly regional hauling, and because people are home at the end of the day, you probably don't have husband and wife traveling together as much. But I suppose, if the opportunity presented itself, if you had, a young family and they've got a little one, everybody could hop in the truck and travel and
For
or no?
freight, that is sometimes a possibility, but for fuel, then we actually don't. Yeah, we have
Okay,
some different things there where yeah, we don't want passengers unless it's like an emergency,
got
where a
it.
car is stranded and you're taking them to the next point.
Mhm.
Just extra
I suppose,
precautions.
is that legislation and regulation that prohibits that type of thing?
And it's sort of, it is actually a bit of an industry practice. So yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So that's interesting. So female lead in your organization, female lead with the Saskatchewan Trucking Association right now.
Mhm.
So we're really starting to see more female flavor in the industry. Are you seeing and feeling the difference yet of the female presence, or do you think that the industry was more ready and accepting of you than what the general public would have thought?
I think the industry was ready. So yeah,
Mhm.
and again, going back to that, um, that the images that we hold about the industry are not the reality. Like it was, they were. I just kind of stepped in, and everyone welcomed me and answered any questions I had. Um, and I know certainly over the last decade there have been a number of programs. Um, One is called Women Building Futures, and that's out in Alberta, but where it's actually um, selecting a group of women who are interested in it and then taking them through. It's a slightly different training course than say what I did when I got my 1A driver's license. Um, but it kind of helps to build confidence and some work skills as well. Um, and now the STA is also working on a similar project with the YWCA in Saskatoon, to
Oh,
help to get women into the industry as truck drivers.
that's
So
very cool.
yeah, it's exciting, and yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that one unfold, as well,
Mhm.
because like the parts industry and service, so like all the mechanics, they're facing a shortage as well of people, and so they have programs there, again, like mentoring uh, women to become mechanics and work on that
Mhm.
side of things as well. Yeah.
I used to ride with a cycling team here in Regina called Spoken Hot, and it's a ladies cycling team. There's probably 90 or 100 women who rode with this team. And one of the gals I used to ride with, she's a heavy duty mechanic. And in her particular shop floor, she was the only woman on the floor. And I remember asking her, like, what's that like? And she's like, it's perfect. She goes, I don't have to put up with any of the traditional female politics.
Yeah.
The guys are just the guys. They are who they are. She said, when she first got there, there was a little bit of, I'll say, jockeying in terms of where she was going to fit. And she was working on her journeyman, I believe. So, there was a little bit of that in the beginning. But she said, like, she had no intent of ever leaving the industry. She loved it, absolutely loved it. And yeah, like that's, you hear stories like that and you just think like that's awesome, because there's so many instances where women and girls are still told, here's the careers that would be good for you. That stuff drives me nuts. So yeah, hearing stories like that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Heather, we only have a couple of minutes left. And so one of the questions that I like to ask all of my guests, I know I can see by the look on your face, you're like, really?
I know. Yeah.
One of the questions that I like to ask all of my guests is, if you had, kind of that nugget of wisdom, whether it was a woman thinking about entering a non-traditional industry or a woman, aspiring to be a CEO, what would that little nugget be that you might want to share?
Um, Try to be aware of your own personal preconceived ideas, and try and figure out if they are holding you back. That would be one of them. And yeah, because I do sometimes think, when you're going into a non-traditional role or taking on a leadership role, then sometimes, and if there aren't a lot of other role models to look at and say, oh, okay, she did it, this is how she did it, I can use some of that. Um, you will be, you do have to kind of figure things out for yourself. So if you have those preconceived ideas, then try and check them at the door. Dive in face first, but then also be prepared. And this goes for anyone who's becoming an entrepreneur. You can have fabulous plans, but the real key is to know that they are going to have to be flexible, because there will always be a challenge or a hiccup or a crisis,
or a pandemic.
Yeah. So, and but there's always going to be something to navigate around. And so if you're able to leave those ideas about, well, these are the rules that I have to operate within while I deal with all that stuff, then if you can leave that stuff behind, then it's a lot easier. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a fantastic discussion, and it's great just to, put the name and the face together, because we talked in email, and now we finally had a chance to put the name and face together. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Barb.
Yeah. Absolutely. We are out of time for today. So as I just said, Heather, thank you for joining me to talk about CSD transport and the changes that you are supporting and leading in an industry that, I think it's a little bit different than most of us see in the movies, let's say, because that's how we form our ideas and opinions about a lot of things. So it's not quite like it looks in the movies.
No, I'm working on that too.
Excellent. Okay. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at barb@googlegirl.ca or reach out on Facebook and Instagram at AboveTheFoldCA. Just a reminder, you can even submit your questions in advance of the live show. Once we can go live again, unfortunately, we're not yet. And you can submit those on our Facebook page. I'm your host, Barb McGrath, local business owner and Google Girl. Remember, you worked hard for your success. Don't keep it a secret.